Hello, welcome to List Off. My name is Nat.
My name is Ossie, and her name's Hayley. We've got Hayley Campbell with us. This was a weird intro. We've got Hayley Campbell with us again because you nominated, is that the right word? You said that you should do top 5 fictional dads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was my first one when you were fishing around for episode ideas. This was months ago.
We did top 5 fictional mums because it was Mother's Day, and now it's going to be Father's Day. So now is the time.
Yeah, it is the time. Although you can just do it anytime, really. Talking about dads. Dads are good.
It's full-time thing. I was going to introduce you as, I don't want to say you had dad issues, but you're a dad fan. You're a dad fan.
Big fan of the dads. Yeah. The right dads. I think I've got some good dads on my list.
That's interesting. Did you find it difficult or easy to come up with some dads?
I had loads of dads. The difficulty was ordering them, I think. But as soon as I thought of my number one, that one didn't move from its top spot.
I found it tricky. I thought it was a tricky one because I felt like in fiction, there's lots of people who are incidentally dads, but the issue of them being a dad barely comes up. So I couldn't just have someone who is incidentally a dad.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've got on my list, it's a top 5 dads, but it's definitely not the best dads. Some of the dads I've got are bad dads.
Same.
Okay, that's fine. So I've got some bad dads, but they're big, culturally big in my world.
Right.
Yeah, I've got some bad dads, but they, I don't know, symbolize something I like in dads.
Yeah. I've also avoided certain dads because I thought it'd be nice to perhaps not overlap. And I went, I think I know some of the other people's dads. So I've sort of tried to avoid...
You don't know me.
I've tried to avoid some dad crossover.
I can't guess anyone's dads. I'm looking forward to this.
I am woefully underprepared for this. I only added my 5th just before we started this call. I have mostly spent the last week or two coughing.
Right.
And it's very hard to think about dads while coughing, or anything for that matter. You can swear while coughing, and that's about it.
Out of the 3 of us, you are the only one of us who is a dad.
Yeah.
You're too busy being a dad to think about other dads. No, that's not true at all.
You're too busy being a real dad to be a fictional dad.
I told the kids what they said, what are you doing? Because they like to know, what are you doing on your list off? And I said, we're doing fictional dads. And they were like, will you be on it? And I was like, no, because I'm not fictional. And the older one said to the little one, like, yeah, he's a real dad because he's our dad. And I was like, yeah, that's it.
That's right.
But so she gets what fictional is, whereas the little one is like, might as well be toothbrush or grapefruit or any word. But yeah, fictional dads, no real dads. I think we should say
that's why my dad isn't on the list, because even though he is a comic book character, I thought that would be kind of a cheat.
Yeah, that doesn't make him fictional. That just makes him literary.
Although technically he gives himself a different name, doesn't he?
He does.
So he's like, that's borderline, isn't it?
Yeah, it was borderline. Also, autobiography is part mythology, isn't it? So, I thought we could maybe bend it, but then I thought, no, I'm going to play this straight. I'm going to do fictional dads.
Me and Nat now have to say how much we like our own dads and would have included them if we were not obeying the rules.
Yeah, I'd include my own dad.
Yeah, me too.
I also like everyone else's dads for a lot of time for both your dads. I'm not knocking either of your dads. I think that's fair. I'm not knocking it. I have lots of real people's dads. I haven't got you on my list, Ossie, because
I'm real.
Your youngest told me that you were real, and I had to come up with a different one.
I think it's fair to say that Hayley's dad's bigger than ours, though.
Yeah.
He's probably got 4 inches on my dad. I don't know.
I reckon.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, with my dad's tiny. So he's like a whole other my dad. He's like my dad if he was a dwarf trying to get into a movie. Actually, dwarfs are allowed into 18s, aren't they? It's children.
He's sort of Hans
That's-
Moleman sized. He's little.
Yeah, it'd be children. If you're
Children.
just small and over 18, you're allowed into an 18.
Two dwarves don't need to climb on each other's heads and go in a coat to get into an 18 movie. That's ridiculous.
You're right.
They just show
That is
their
ridiculous.
ID and get
Yeah, there you
offended
go.
at the rude person and you. Right,
Fair enough.
You've got to
Fair
kick us
enough.
off. You've got to kick us off with your number 5.
My number 5 was one that I kind of thought back of childhood, and this popped into my head. And I hope it's not something I've revisited, and I'm slightly worried that there's something in it that would make me go, that maybe is not such a great dad. But a great dad from my childhood was William, who's the name of the dad in the Roald Dahl book, Danny the Champion of the World.
Oh, I think that is a good dad.
Good dad.
And he's works in a garage. He and his son Danny live in a caravan behind the garage, and they go off and have lots of kind of I was going to say quite wholesome kind of country adventures, but a lot of it involves drugging pheasants.
Yeah.
So
really elaborate.
but that bit, that thing about dipping a thread with some sort of like drug that would make them go to sleep, and then getting raisins and threading a raisin that's been sat in the solution.
Oh, was it that? I thought they put sleeping pills inside the raisin and then sewed it up.
Oh, my understanding was that it was just soaked in.
Ah.
But maybe you're right.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
I don't remember this bit at all.
And it's so they can drug some pheasants, and but it felt like it was a very transportative book, that, and very much put me in that world, which is kind of a very clever thing. Which I think is, I mean, it's a thing that all books do, but I think it felt different because it was probably an early example of that happening.
And is he not another example? I think we're going to have lots of probably. Is he not? He's a single dad, isn't he? The dad in that. I don't remember the mum being around.
I think he's a widower.
Yeah, that may come up again.
Yeah, I guess that's because that's what I mean. I think to be a dad in a film, or any piece of fiction, it's almost like dads have certain roles. Often it's like it's a revenge plot. So you know they're a dad because someone's got their kid, or you know they're a dad because there's no mum. Like it's like there's like a difference. When we're doing fictional mums, it's a different thing. Whereas in fiction, women are often mums.
Yeah.
Dads can be incidentally dads, but the idea that they're a dad is just to tell an audience, they're like you, normal people. They're not like, the idea of their dadness isn't a point of it.
Yeah.
So so this is an example of that, where it's like, it's kind of important that he's a dad. Of course, the other good thing about Danny the Champion of the World that really ignited my childish mind is that in the book Danny the Champion of the World, the dad is reading the BFG to Danny before the BFG existed.
Whoa, I didn't realize it was before.
Oh, it's before. And I really like that shared universe sort of thing he has.
That's like product placement.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Hayley, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is, this is sort of a cheat. It's All Dads, played by Eugene Levy. Because I think for a certain generation, if you saw American Pie, he is the iconic dad. He's embarrassing in his openness and interest in Jim's life, but he's just kind of looking for a way to help. So when he walks in on Jim fucking that pie, he just says, well, we'll just tell your mother we ate it. And I think all the best dads are just looking for a way to help. And they don't know what to do with a problem they can't personally fix. Like, if I tell my own dad about a problem he can't fix, I just get to watch a man collapse. And it's like, I wish I hadn't told him. But if I tell him something he can fix, it doesn't matter what the problem is. energized by it. And so Jim's dad didn't really care that his son fucked a pie, because it was a solution. It was a thing he could give a solution to. He could fix something. And also, most recently, Eugene Levy was the dad in Schitt's Creek, playing the father to his real life son, Dan Levy, who has inherited his eyebrows. Lucky man. He has the best eyebrows to look concerned with and supportive with. And I've got a dad with similar eyebrows, so I had to put him on my list. I think eyebrows are a big thing on dads. And Eugene Levy has got the most iconic ones out there. Love him.
Did he have a career playing young men before, or did he only really break through as a dad?
Well, I didn't notice a career as a young man.
No, I think
I remember him first as Jim's dad, and then I went back a bit, but not far. Best in show.
Let's ask the Internet movie database.
No, I know that one of the facts is he is meant to be the brother of Rick Moranis in Ghostbusters 2, except he is cut out completely. So there's meant to be a subplot with Rick Moranis and his brother that is cut out of Ghostbusters 2, and he is. So I guess that's his sort of. He's a bit Rick Moranis in the late 80s. I've never seen Schitt's Creek, and I've just done the thing where I've heard of Dan Levy, but I've never seen him in anything. And you've done that thing in my head where I've gone, I get it now.
Yeah.
Their father and son.
Yeah.
And that's got Catherine O'Hara in it, right?
Yeah, she's fucking amazing in Schitt's Creek. She's so funny. And
yeah, she's a good one.
I love Schitt's Creek, although the first like 5 episodes you're watching it going, I don't understand what everyone loves about this show. And then somehow it clicks into place and you go, oh, I get it. It's just nice. It's a nice show.
Yeah, Lily watches it, and I haven't really watched it, but every time I come in the room, I'm like, oh, this is quite funny actually. And I'm also in a WhatsApp group with a guy who posts like meme gifs from it 24/7. So, you know, I'm quite exposed to it in that way. I think I've got most of the plot from just reaction gifs. But you're right, if there was a top 5 eyebrow havers, Eugene Levy would be well up there.
He did the voice for the dad in Finding Dory, but the fish didn't have eyebrows. I thought they missed a trick. But he's like, you hear his voice and you go, he's a dad. Iconic.
Yeah, for sure. Another good dad.
Yeah.
My number 5 is so bad. I can't vouch at all this is a good dad, but I liked him at the time. It's Charlie Burrows from the 90s UK sitcom The Upper Hand, based on the American sitcom Who's the Boss, which had
I have never seen this.
It had Honor Blackman in it. That was the most famous, sort of impressive thing about it. And I quite fancied the daughter, who is Kelly Bright, who's now in EastEnders.
As Danny Dyer's wife, isn't
she's Danny Dyer's wife now, yeah. But I liked her best when she was Charlie Burrows' daughter. I think she was called Joanne or Joanna.
Maybe.
Anyway.
Maybe.
I just used to watch that. I'm not a sitcom guy. You know I'm not a sitcom guy, but I used to. There's a few sort of bog standard British sitcoms that I just used to watch, and that was one of them. And I just used to really like it. And I thought he was a really good dad. He's a former footballer who once, like, I think you get the impression he's had like a slightly dodgy past, and I think he's from the East End of London, and he moves out to Hertfordshire or somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, a home counties kind of place, to look after. I think he's a widower, and I think he takes a job as like this kind of posh lady's housekeeper, but like a housekeeper where you go and live there with your daughter. And so she has a son, and her mum is Honor Blackman, who's kind of all sort of randy and
right,
lecherous and stuff. And it's like, I don't think there's like 5 or 6 series of it where the housekeeper, Charlie Burrows, and the posh woman who's the housekeeper for try and date other people and have romantic things, while obviously to everybody else slowly falling in love with each other. And I think it ends with them getting married. But he's just like a nice dad who was he became dad to the boy in the house, and it was an unusual sort of, he's quite a macho geezery sort of bloke played by Paul McGann,
Joe McGann.
Joe McGann, not Paul McGann. Joe McGann. You're right. The other one.
Another McGann.
And
Paul McGann's not macho geezery bloke.
no, but he wasn't he? Nat? He was kind of like
Yeah.
like
His
a
brother's
blokey,
a bit more.
He was a
Yeah.
blokey kind of guy. Yes,
He
Joe
looks like the
McGann.
kind of guy who plays rugby.
Right.
But he was
Not one of us.
He was supposed to be a football player. You know, he was like
Football.
didn't have the build for rugby, but he was just. I don't know. He was like an unusual sort of nice dad to have on the TV.
Yeah. I used to watch The Upper Hand as well. It doesn't strike me as something like I certainly couldn't vouch for it being funny, but like I definitely used to watch it. It's based on Who's the Boss, where that character is Tony Danza from Taxi. But again, I quite like the idea. Like both of them are quite funny titles, where it's a bit like Who's the Boss, and it's like she is. It's like it's just like the thing is like I'm a man, so I should be the boss, right? It's like no, you've been employed to be a housekeeper. What? But who's got the upper hand? She does. She's the boss. She employs you.
But he wasn't presented as being like an embarrassment or he was doing the right thing for his family, for his daughter, and he took pride in doing a good job of looking after the house and looking after the kids. And as somebody that does that kind of stuff nowadays, maybe he was like a seminal influence on me.
Sure, I actually do think that's I think that's an improvement on the American one, whereas I think the idea is much more in the American one that Tony Danza's like, hey, it's me, Tony Danza. Can you believe I'm working for a woman?
Yeah,
it's that sort of. So it's kind of an improvement on the format. They've kind of like sharpened off the edges a bit and gone, surely this makes a bit more sense. And it's like, yeah, we've got the premise down now. We've got the premise.
It hasn't sort of lived long in people's memories, I don't think. It's not one that comes up a lot. But Charlie Burrows is my dad, number 5.
My number 4. I was thinking of this, and I was thinking of movies with dad characters that I like. And I sort of disregarded some more well-received films that would probably in favor of this film. And it's a film that I don't think is terribly highly regarded, but it's a film that whenever I watch it, often by accident, I watch it always to the end, and I think it's a film that I think I need to really stick up for it because I always think it's really well done, and that is Gil Buckman, who is Steve Martin from the film Parenthood. And I think it's a film, but it's also a film that's specifically about families and fathers and son and siblings and nieces and nephews and children. And Gil Buckman's Steve Martin. And it feels like when I was a kid, Parenthood is kind of a bit of a disappointing film because it's got Steve Martin's only got one sort of really funny Steve Martin-y bit. And the rest of it you go, oh, the rest of it's just more like, it's kind of a bit serious, but there's one bit where he goes a bit Steve Martin-y. And that is... And the older I get, though, I think the more I appreciate all the other stuff in it. And it's a Ron Howard movie, you know. It's not like... So it feels like it's almost designed to be a bit kind of middle of the road. But it kind of isn't. It's kind of... There's loads of stuff in it that you kind of think, God, that's the first time I've sort of seen anyone tackle lots of these topics in a sort of mainstream film. And I think it was really pushing a lot of boundaries. It's also a film which has a big Randy Newman song that plays throughout it. So when you watch it now, it feels like you're watching a weird Toy Story spin-off. It's got that sort of like, oh yeah, it's like a weird, and it's almost, and it's a very Randy Newman-y Randy Newman song. And Gil Buckman is Steve Martin, and he's a dad who doesn't want to be like his own dad, who's Jason Robards, who basically he never saw growing up. But Gil Buckman keeps having kids. He keeps wanting to not have so many kids, but has ended up, I think he's then got his 4th on the way during the film. And he realizes that to be able to afford his 4th kid, he has to work more. And then he's terrified of turning into his own dad by being an absent father. And he's constantly thinking he's failing his kids. It's a lot of that stuff, which is that feels very modern. One of his kids has special needs, and he sort of sees it as a personal sort of failing or something that he's not doing as a dad. Whereas his own dad, who he's determined not to be like, has a favourite son who is not Steve Martin, who's Tom Hulse. And so you have this weird kind of love triangle, but it's between fathers and son. But Tom Hulse is a total fuck up, and he's but the dad respects him so much more because he's this guy who's sort of not got a family. And it's almost like Jason Robards and Steve Martin are basically the same man of a different generation, but think they don't like each other. Whereas Tom Hulse has got nothing in common with either of them. And he's a fuck up. And he's the one that the kind of thing of it is all built around. And you've got Diane Wiest, who's the sister, who's got a different relationship with them. It's a very sort of smartly put together film, I think.
I only remember, well, I haven't seen the film in ages and ages, but there's one line of it that is almost in constant usage between, like, in my family. And I can't remember the setup of it, but it's like a scene in a kitchen, and Keanu Reeves is explaining to Diane Wiest some interaction he's had with the kid. Maybe it was wanking. He'd caught the kid wanking or something. I can't remember. But he says, right. That's what little dudes do. And that line is just used all the time. It's weird what goes into the regular usage.
Yeah, but I think there's lots of that stuff in that film. It's like really sort of smartly put together, and it's all about that. Keanu Reeves is gonna be a dad, and they assume he's gonna be terrible because he's Keanu Reeves playing Keanu Reeves, and they go, this guy's like an idiot, but he's actually a super sweet, nice guy, and they go, actually, this guy's gonna be a great dad because he really cares about people. And all the people that you think are kind of more successful are not great dads. Rick Moranis is another dad who thinks the kids need to be educated at a really young age, but then he's sort of his little girl kind of hates it and is just doing it because of him. So you have all these father and son relationships that all are kind of intersecting and being.
I don't think I've ever watched this. I don't think I've ever watched it. I should watch it.
Yeah, it's sort of weird.
I was just going to say, I always like the way that Rick Moranis's wife spite scoffs Snickers in the wardrobe after he leaves, because they've got this like tight like fitness and eating regime, as tight as the teaching the children thing, and he leaves and she's mad at him, so she goes into her secret stash of chocolates and scoffs them.
And Tom Hulse has also got his own kid. He shows up with his own newborn or this new young kid that no one's ever met, who he's called Cool, and is like this sort of 8-year-old kid. And you realise as well that he's terrible. He's a fuck up, and he doesn't look after his own son. And it's sort of it's that relationship that makes them all kind of realise, actually, the one that we think's the cool son is the one who's not a great guy. Good movie, underrated movie, I think, and has like lots of, like I say, it's got that kind of Pixar thing about it because of the Randy Newman thing, and it's got that kind of it's got lots of similar Pixar-y moments. And I genuinely thought about it at the end. I was thinking in my head, I was going, what movie am I thinking of where these characters are in it? And I was almost surprised that the answer was Parenthood. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's the film that's really kind of got me in the guts loads of times.
I always watch it when it's on too. Can't help it. My number 4 is a classic. It's Homer Simpson of The Simpsons. He was the first dad I remember noticing on TV who was a normal fuck up rather than like an overbearing authority figure or someone who was meek and who was only there to be like hit over the head with a newspaper by the wife or something. He was just the most average dude on TV. And they're supposed to be this dysfunctional family, but I kind of like it. They seem nice. They seem good to me. He was loving enough to tape a picture of Maggie to his office wall. And he was also, you know, he's absent in the sense that he's got a job and he's not in the house all the time. but only enough for the kids to develop their own interests and personalities, unlike Ned Flanders, who's got these completely indoctrinated kids who just seem to be mini Flanders. So he's allowed his kids to become these independent human beings. And I really like reading about all the special rules that all of the writers have for him. So they say that he can be explosively angry, but Groening had a rule that Homer could never strangle Bart in a way that was premeditated. It always had to just
You had to be reacting.
yeah, it had to be explosively angry. And Homer is I love that he's sweethearted, and I love that he completely knows that Lisa is smarter than him, and there are times when he defers to her. He's super protective of his family, and he has no ego. And sometimes he gives up these huge things just to make his kids happy, like that time he sold his ticket to a ride on the Duff blimp just so he could enter Lisa in a beauty pageant because she was feeling really shitty about how she looked. So she was going to go in that, and she was going to feel better about herself. A lot of the writers have said things like, as long as you write Homer like he's a dog, it will come off good. So he's loyal, he's optimistic, and he's instantly gratified by food or whatever it is. I just think he's sweet, and he's one of my longest standing TV dads, I think, out there.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of living the dream as a dad, in that there's all these points when you're a parent where you're like, oh, I just wish my kids would stay like this and not grow up to the next stage. Like I'm all for growing up. I'm all for it. I'm not C.S. Lewis, but like I understand that. I do have those moments where I'm like, just stay like this. And Homer has that because his kids have been the same for like 30 something years now.
Yeah, I think he's aged 4 years. I think he began when he was 34 or something, and now he's like 39.
Has he lost one zigzag off his head?
The terrifying thing is now to realize that I am older than Homer Simpson.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me. I cannot accept it, especially when I know there are new episodes being made. I think, didn't they do one recently where it's like Homer as a teenager and he's into like Wheatus or something, and you go, well, this is mental now. I can't have this.
So they're doing it like they're moving it up, their backstories.
Yeah, it's like a moving timeline.
Wow, because he used to be into like Jefferson Airplane or something, didn't he?
Yeah, that makes sense. The idea that like I'm older, and that was the thing, wasn't it? Because when it started as well, or certainly when I became aware of it as a kid, I assumed it's a cartoon about Bart Simpson, and it's only when you watch it go, oh, it's sort of, if it's more about him than it's about any of the kids. Isn't that Homer? I think is Matt Groening's dad's real name. I think,
and
right?
it's also his son's name. He just calls everything Homer.
Now, we talked about Marge on the top 5 fictional mothers list, and neither of us were putting her in. And I think it's that thing where she never feels to me like that rounded of a character in a way. Like it feels like she has that thing of a mother in a TV show who is totally defined really by her relationship to the children and to the husband, kind of thing, whereas Homer gets to be the kind of hero, anti-hero, icon of the thing, really. I mean, it's not Bart's show, Lisa's the smartest, but she doesn't win because of that. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the Lisa show. Yeah, Homer's great. My number 4 is Nikolai Petrovich Kirsanov, who is from the Ivan Turgenev novel Fathers and Sons from 1862.
Lovely stuff.
just going from The Simpsons to that is it. But like, this is, I was thinking about books, and I was thinking this is my favorite kind of literature father. And again, I was thinking I haven't read the right books. Like they're not coming to me. Like most of my favorite, say, young man characters have completely irrelevant dads or awful dads. And the kid is often, the young man is like defined by not being their dad and that kind of thing. But in this book, Fathers and Sons, this guy, his son is called Arcady, and it's kind of the main character, and he's gone off to university. This is in pre-revolution, kind of real Tsarist Russia, and he's gone off to university, and he's got all these new ideas of nihilism from his new nihilist friend, and comes back to his dad's kind of estate, where he has all his serfs and stuff, and his dad is a widower. And his dad is just so pleased to have his son back from university. Because imagine, coming back from university means like probably a week on a coach, you know what I mean, with horses. And he's so pleased to have his son back, and he just thinks his son's brilliant. But then he's hearing his son go on about all this nihilism, and he's like this lovely guy who just lives for his son and is heartbroken by having lost his wife. And you just kind of love him. And all the way through the book, you're going, I'm not sure about this main character, but I love his dad, and it's spoilers, they're relatively reconciled at the end, but it's an awful, like in a lot of those kind of these classic Russian novels, like an awful lot happens. Like everyone gets married and dies, and everyone, this crazy stuff happens. Everyone has 10 names, but this warm kind of father who is seen by everyone as kind of a bit pathetic and too nice and kind of just happy with his small time life. A small time. He has like 100 serfs on his estate, many acres, but he's not considered. He's not a big strapping kind of hero with a sword on a horse, like you ought to be in a kind of classic Russian Tsarist way. But he's just like a lovely guy who's looking out for the right things, and it's a really nice book about fathers and sons, and you're one of my favorite novels. And I had to stick that one in there. Nikolai Petrovich Kursanov.
Have you got Have you got that in your list, Nat? Next,
maybe
you got the same
we'll
one.
We'll see.
Snap.
We'll see. We'll find out. But my number 3 is not that guy. It is a guy who is a bad dad. And you'll get it when I tell you that whenever I bring up James Earl Jones, I like to explain him as being, James Earl Jones. He's the guy who plays the dad in Star Wars. So my number 3 is Darth Vader, because he fit he's a bad dad for sure. And he's also a bad dad all the way through, really. It fit my brief because he's someone who isn't incidentally a dad. He's someone who, his being a dad changes the course of a story. It is incidental to the plot of it that he is a dad. He's a cool looking dad, to be fair. And I think it is one of those sort of very kind of iconic designs that's a bit kind of sort of feudal Japan, but also just the idea that when you think of like Star Wars being influenced by comic strips and things, something you would never have in a comic strip would be a character who is completely black. And you have that sort of design of something where in film it works, where you can have these stormtroopers that are all white and this baddie who is all black in contrast, because light in film, you can see it all. You can see that it's not just all black. It's lots of different shapes happening. It's a very cool, very sort of cinematic piece of design. He's definitely a bad dad. I mean, there is the idea that when they make the idea that, it's all about him, really, it's all about him, that essentially, though, he's never a good dad. He's always a bad man. I think the redemption of him at the end is always a bit like, sure, yeah, but it doesn't make him a good guy. He's still a bad guy. I don't know that Anakin Skywalker is ever a good person, really. I think he's, I don't know, but he's a bad dad, but he is a huge dad.
Yeah,
in the world of culture.
I find his redemption at the end very, very unconvincing. To me, it's a bit like people who are lifelong atheists who suddenly find God on their deathbed, and it's like,
exactly.
Come on, he's thinking, maybe I wasn't all right, all these awful things I've done because I'm gonna die, type thing. That's not That's not a good kind of. I mean, that's only like was like he was a really good dad for like 1 minute of his life. That's not
Yeah,
good,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Very much so.
But it's an impressive dad to have been played by 4 or 5 people. 5 people. That's impressive in one series of films. Very impressive. Many men made that dad, and one little boy.
All inside the one coat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why it's so tall.
My number 3 is Frank Costanza in Seinfeld, who is played by the late great Jerry Stiller, who is also Ben Stiller's dad. So he's probably a good dad in real life, from reports. He wasn't the original George Costanza's dad in the show. He turned up around season 5 when they recast it. And the previous version, if you go back, like, it's weird. The previous version was played by another actor, and he was kind of meek and forgettable, and Stiller reworked him as this total lunatic. So Peter Melman, who's one of the writers on Seinfeld, said that the character was in this perpetual state of moral outrage. So he's this cranky old man who challenges anyone to a fist fight. And all of this is, according to everything I've read about him, completely unlike Jerry Stiller himself. But he's made this madness into another iconic character who originally was quite forgettable. He was just some dad in a sitcom. And I love that he's prone to fits of rage. And he is such a madman that he has raised George Costanza, who is this giant neurotic mess that is George Costanza. But and one of the ways he's done that is he invented a festival. It's a secular holiday called Festivus. It happens on December 23rd. It's called the Festivus for the rest of us. And it's where the family gathers around an aluminium pole, and they do things like there's the feats of strength, there's the airing of grievances. And I love it because I don't like Christmas. You guys know I'm not big on Christmas. And I love that he just started this non-commercial thing. And the festival doesn't end until someone pins the host to the ground. It just sounds like something that would have happened in my house as a child. And there were moments where my dad was pinned to the floor by his friends after the airing of grievances. It wasn't an official festival, but watching it on Seinfeld, you went, yeah, we do that too. I just think he's a great character in himself, but he's one of the very best things about an already brilliant show. Love him.
I would have had him on my list. I would have had him, but I predicted Campbell will have him. I think he's a great sitcom dad. I think, and kind of probably outside of the main cast, he is the best character in Seinfeld. He's probably better than some of the main cast.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a, and he's one of those people who, I mean, I don't really know what his career was. I haven't sort of retrospectively seen him in a lot of stuff, but he is just one of those actors that when you see him, he's just like kind of, this guy's incredible. I love it. I love seeing Jerry Stiller and stuff.
And when he's
such a madman.
He's such a madman. And when he died, there was this clip going around that was a blooper reel from an episode of Seinfeld where he was saying to Elaine, "You want a piece of me?" And Julia Louis-Dreyfus could not keep a straight face because he is just so funny. And the blooper reel was just her cracking up laughing. And the scene was just ruined over and over again because he was too funny. He's amazing.
I think that Festivus as well is kind of like, that's a real thing now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Well, it was one of the Seinfeld writers had it in his house as he was growing up, and he was tasked with writing an episode, so he just stuck it in, and now it's a thing.
Yeah, it will probably outlive the memory of the show. Be like, what are you doing? 23rd. Well,
it's the airing of grievances.
That's a good one. Even me, Seinfeld hater, is like, yeah, that is a good character. It's a good one. Is my number 3? My number 3.
Mm-hmm.
My number 3 is Man. It's Man from the film The Road, 2009, based on the Cormac McCarthy book that I haven't read because everyone says it's really miserable, and the film is pretty miserable. But yeah, played by Viggo
It's good.
Mortensen.
Good miserable.
I'm sure, but I didn't. I can only read like The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
You just talked about a Russian novel, and you're saying this one's too miserable. It's really short. This one too.
So's the Russian novel I talked about. Actually, it's quite short. Anyway,
Okay.
but yeah, I really liked the film On the Road. When I say really liked, obviously it was miserably horrible, but I had that in mind a lot prior to having kids. This kind of like absolute ultimate aversion. It's a post-apocalyptic world. Something terrible has happened. This man has got his son. He's a widower, and they've got to survive with only 2 bullets left, with no food, in a world that's full of crazy marauding gangs, and it's just awful. So it's like the most extreme version of dadding, really. That's the hardcore dadding. And I think if you're thinking about becoming a dad, you'd be like, I don't know, how good would I be at fending off the gangs of people trying to steal your child to eat or whatever they're doing, you know what I mean, and foraging for petrol or whatever, like it's hardcore dadding. And I think we know from fiction that hardcore extreme situations is a great way of exploring things that we all feel in smaller amounts, you know what I mean? So like when you're holding your kid's hand as they walk along a wall or something, and you're like, I don't know, it's a 1.5 foot drop, you better hold on to my hand, that kind of thing. It's all the little minor versions of your road. And I think it's much easier to think about things in extreme ways and stuff, but that kind of extreme dadding that's in the road, it's quite touching. It's quite, you just feel a real kind of, this dad is just doing everything he can for his kid to keep his kid alive and get somewhere better. And yeah, that's very, very moving for me, when you think about it from a sort of dad perspective, as like, you just do anything in an awful situation like that. Thankfully, it's not that bad at the moment, so we don't have to. You can just watch telly or something, it's fine, but that kind of feeling of, it's a real expression of a feeling of being a dad in an extreme way. That's very moving. And Viggo Mortensen is quite a good daddy kind of dude. I can definitely take him as a dad in a film.
The thing, again, I haven't read the book, but the thing of the film, whether it's in the book or not, I don't know, that really stayed with me is the bit of him going to such great extremes to get a can of drink out of a machine to give to the kid. That's a bit I always think about, to the point where it feels like this could be an advert for Coke. Do you know what I mean? That could just be that bit, and at the end it comes up Coke. In the same way, in that bit in Ice Cold in Alex was actually used as like a Carlsberg advert, the bit where they finally get the beer and they're just watching the kind of, and then it just comes up with like Carlsberg. It's like, it feels like that, almost like you could use it as a proper soft drink ad.
Yeah, the bit where there's a bit where they find the like underground store of food, and it's just like all this food, and they've had like nothing to eat, and suddenly there's all this food, and it's like pristine packaging and stuff. It really, to fans of packaged food like us, it's really like, oh yeah, that'd be the hole in the ground I'd be looking for in the post-apocalypse. Like there's chocolate bars and stuff, Top dad.
My number 2 is George McFly from the movie Back to the Future. And I'd say significantly not George McFly from the film Back to the Future 2, where he's played by someone else briefly and you only see like the sort of stand-in for Crispin Glover sort of popping about and trying to cover his face.
Is he even into
while he waves at people? No, he's not into at all. The character is briefly.
Where?
You sort of see him in, well, you get him in sort of cut scenes from the first one. You see him. The dad is played by someone else in the future, but only for like a second, where he's sort of hovering upside down in a special sort of flying thing. And you occasionally see Crispin Glover, or a man who's obviously meant to be him, kind of waving like that. Like, hi, I'm covering my face so you can't see who I am. But specifically in the film, I love Back to the Future. And I especially love it, or especially loved it. I feel like I I've sort of stopped watching it now because I feel I might have seen it too much, and I always worry about how well these films all hold up. But I watched that film continuously as a kid, and when I was a kid, before the age of, I guess, my teens, I would always see Marty McFly as this sort of cool guy, but he's like a movie cool guy. But within the school, he's not the coolest guy in the school, and he's not the best one, but he sticks up for people. And he's a cool guy, and that's the kind of person I go, I relate to this guy. This is what I'm going to be like. And then I think when you get to the same age Marty McFly is, you think, oh no, I'm George McFly. I'm not Marty McFly. I'm much closer to the guy, his dad in the 50s. And again, it's a great film about sort of fathers and sons and generational thing, with the idea that you can just go back and see what your actual dad was like when he was your age. And, you know, with the bit with this one where he finds him, chases him, and he has the myth of him as being the guy who punched out Biff and won over the mum. And when he meets him, he's this guy who isn't that guy at all. And when he first follows him, of course, you have the reveal of Marty McFly saying, he's a peeping Tom. As he first finds him spying on his mum getting undressed while sat up a tree. It's that sort of, it's that kind of disappointment of people, but also sort of realize, kind of getting a better idea of who they are, because you don't get to see the mythologized version of who they are as a grown-up. And I think that performance as well, I think, is incredible. And I think partly as well that, you know, I sort of seek out films that Crispin Glover's in now, but only because there's just not that many. Whereas he was always like, who's this guy? He was like, it was such a kind of star performance with someone who I never really saw in other films, where it would always be like, why is this guy not in other stuff?
Especially when he's a young man. It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like he's great in that movie. And there's so much about him that you can kind of, that feels much more like, it feels like he's almost a more rounded character than Marty McFly is. He's given all the kind of stuff to do.
Yeah.
He's given all the stuff
he
to
has the
overcome.
journey.
Yeah. Whereas Marty McFly isn't really, his thing is, I have to defeat time. Whereas he's almost like, he's going through he exists in the story, but the person who changes isn't him. It's his dad is the one who kind of changes over the course of it. His dad kind of becomes the main character by the fact that Marty McFly isn't allowed to change because he knows, he's been told he can't. He's got to be the one who stays the same. But the person who has to change plot-wise is this guy who's not the main character.
You just reminded me, I had a dream. The best dream I ever had was I went back in time to the 60s, and I was like, I realized I was in the 60s, and I was like, what am I going to do? I have to find my dad. But I was in New York, so I didn't know. I was in New York, and I was like, who do I know in New York in the 60s? I was like, I don't know. I guess I know that Miles Davis and Charles Mingus are in New York in the 60s, right? So I went and found Mingus, because in his autobiography he's quite clear about where he lives and everything. So I had this dream where I'm going to Charles Mingus, and I'm like, you know, I'm saying like, you know, let me in your house, and he's like, no, man, go away, I'll shoot you. You know, Mingus is crazy. So I'm like, you know, I can prove that I'm from the future. I can prove I know what your next album is going to be called. You know. Anyway, I managed to convince him that that I'm from the future by telling him things that are in his autobiography that nobody else could know, because he hasn't told them to his biographer yet at that point. So I convinced him that I'm from the future, because like he's a good person to go to, because he's crazy enough to believe that someone from the future might come and visit him. And I had to basically convince him to get me back to the UK so that I could then find my dad. And I think I got to the point where I was getting on a steamer. I mean, it's the 60s. I could have got a plane, but I got on a steamer. And because you just would, wouldn't you? You know? And then I got woken up. But it was been such a great dream to that point. And I was just like, what's going to happen? You know, when you go back to bed and you're just like, oh, please go back to sleep in the same dream. Like, please get me back into that dream. Never found out what happened.
I think that'd be a great movie. I'd watch that.
Yeah, but you need to write the second half.
Hmm.
I think it's be quite difficult. I think my dad would be a lot more freaked out than Mingus by someone visiting him from the future, his own son.
Sure.
No.
But I like the idea that you would know his stuff because you've read a autobiography of someone.
Right.
And I think that's interesting by going, who's here in the 60s? I think that would be a fun idea.
It was a good job it was New York and not like Leicester or something. Actually, if it was Leicester, I could have found my way back home quite easily.
Yeah.
Forget it. Good dad.
Yeah, good dad. My number 2 is Gomez Adams. And I think this is the only DILF on my list. I bet you weren't expecting not many DILFs.
No, I was expecting a lot of DILFs.
Yeah, well, there's only one. Only one. Shocked me too. But if I'm going to pick a Gomez, I'd go with Raul Julia in the films. I thought he was perfection. But the character of Gomez, he's a great dad because he's mischievous, he's wildly enthusiastic, and he'll quickly get swept up in other people's plans, no matter how stupid or whatever the kids need, he'll get for them. So they want to play autopsy, he'll go find them the sharpest knife. They're spoiled in the most goth ways imaginable, but he's also like very interested and super supportive of these two kids and all of their mad creative endeavors, whatever they are. He's constantly telling them how proud he is of them, and he seems to actually want them around, which is rare for like fictional dads. Fictional dads are like absent guys. And the pilot of the TV show is even him not wanting to send the kids to school. He goes, why have children just to get rid of them? I'm opposed to the whole nonsense. So I like that. And I like that he teaches them to be free of judgment and to not worry what others think and to believe in themselves, blah, 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 blah. Mostly I like Gomez because in all of these TV shows and movies where husbands are cheating on their wives and leaving the family home, Gomez would never. He's a dad, and he's also this doting husband to Morticia. He's completely in love with her, especially when she speaks French, and they still fancy each other, which is not usually the situation for couples who are married with kids in TV shows. They're just kind of tired and they can't be bothered. But these two are randy. I love them. I love
especially
them
especially in
the
sitcoms.
as well. Yeah, in sitcoms they're not like this.
I think you're right. He's such a good character because he's so like sort of manically interested in his kids and like supportive to them. You're right. It's a really unusual kind of like, yes, I'm totally. Of course you are doing that, you know, and that's such a fun thing to be because kids are so used to parents being like, well, you know, stop doing that or whatever. When you do take an interest, they're so pleased, you know, they're so into that.
It's interesting that he is like, as a family, they're designed to be like the opposite of all other sitcom families. But it is funny that a lot of what they do by being opposite is actually them being really nice to each other. It's not at all like, it's sort of like that, and you realize that this kind of anti-sitcom with all these characters who are meant to be like, and they're almost like horror characters that are sort of the nicest people in sitcoms. It's that way that you sometimes go, you know what, I'd happily go to Summer Isle where the Wicker Man is because they're having a great time. You know, they're not actually doing like, it's bad if you're Edward Woodward, but essentially they are not really harming anyone apart from once a year if the harvest fails. But apart from that, they are not. They're actually quite good people. They're not judgmental, and they're not as narrow-minded as Edward Woodward is.
And in the Addams Family movie, when they're like running around the graveyard at night playing Wake the Dead, it's not for any creepy reason. They're just checking on like their uncles and aunts and seeing how they are, saying hello. It's I think they're a lovely little family. But of course, I would say that.
No, they are though. And are you a fan of the original comic books, the comic strips as well? Does it
Yes.
does it
Yeah.
extend to that? Because I don't know them well.
I have they're not comic strips so much. They're just little one-pager cartoons. But I
Yeah.
have a framed one. It's not an original, obviously, although I would kill for it. In the flat here, and it's the one where it's Gomez and Morticia are sitting on a sofa in front of a cobwebby fireplace. And he says to her, "Are you unhappy, darling?" And she goes, "Yes, yes, completely." And that's my favorite one.
No, it's great. It's a super character. I
The nice
watched
thing,
so much of the black and white TV show. It used to be on all the time, didn't it?
yeah, it'd be like a sort of 6 o'clock kind
Yeah.
of in between adult TV and kids TV, and sort of fits that role perfectly. I'm pretty sure John Astin's still alive, right? He's still with us. The original Gomez, I think. I think
Really?
he's still there.
Raul
it's
Julia,
funny-
not so much.
No.
No, it's funny how they're both very well cast. That they do have this. They do both have a real aspect of the kind of Charles Adams cartoon about them as well. They've got a real look of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like John Astin as well. I think he's like a great actor.
My number 2 is one that I reckon Nat would have guessed would be on my list. Probably. I like to include a Pixar character, and I've included Marlin the clownfish, who is the father of Nemo in Finding Nemo. And, in the film, Finding Nemo has to find his son, and he's very worried, and he is brave and courageous in the finding of his son, right? But that's not it, right? It's the opening bits of the film where you see that he has his lovely wife, Coral, and they live in their anemone or whatever it is. And then there's a barracuda attack, and Coral is gone, and all the eggs are gone, all except for one. And it's like almost all Pixar films, or at least all the best ones. It's that little setup at the beginning that you go, oh, okay, I 100% get the importance of his son to him, because you've just shown me he loved his wife Fish, yeah, and they had a lovely home, and he was going to have a whole nest of fish babies, whatever they're called, and he's just left with the one, and so he's super overprotective at the beginning, and then he's a bit more like, no, it's okay, I'm being too overprotective. He's very self-aware. I'm being too overprotective. You go out and enjoy the world a bit, go to nursery, school, whatever. And then he goes missing, right? And it's that setup gives him all the kind of way more depth than a kind of Liam Neeson film where his kid's been captured, taken hostage by a terrorist or something. You don't need all that. You don't need all that. You just need your kid to have gone missing when you were looking the other way. That's way more scary to a parent, And yeah, I didn't have kids when I saw Finding Nemo, but he's a fantastic character. And people talk about Nemo and they talk about Dory. If you go to the aquarium and they have clownfishes and what are they? Angelfish, I think, whatever. And people go, look, it's Nemo. Look, it's Dory. And I'm always thinking, what about Marlin? He's the absolute soul of that film, and he's just another kind of, again, another widower, another kind of extreme dadding situation. He has to deal with sharks and turtles and all sorts, and Australian seagulls. But he's fantastic, and he's again like another classic Pixar moving character that we're talking about, a little cartoon fish.
I think that film is great because it really does amp up the anxiety factor for something. There's a lot of mild to strong peril in that film, and there's points of it when I watch it and I think, but it actually is impossible. It really takes that kind of needle in a haystack idea. It's like, you can't find him.
Yeah.
And it's almost that kind of, it has to go against your own instincts of this impossible task and make it believable. I find that really satisfying.
And they do that in this brilliant way where they set up at the beginning, like, here's a little reef which they live on, and it's in like a nice little village, and here's where they live, and here's where the school is, and that kind of thing, right? So it's set up all small, and then you get just the vastness of the ocean. You know, there's a scene where they see like a whale, and they're like, oh, hey, like a whale, and it's way over there, and they don't realize how big it is until they shout and gets attention, and it comes back around, and it's an absolutely huge whale. And that kind of thing, it gives you that brilliant films can do, where they give you sense of scale and they give you sense of environment and stuff. And it's like this huge ocean. So you really feel like they've crossed an ocean chasing this kid. Brilliant. Great dad.
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
Although just being a parent sounds terrifying to me.
I'd rather
Doesn't need to be in the sea with sharks.
I'd rather be a parent of a human than a fish, I think. Although I guess fish don't know better, you know. So
Yeah.
we don't know.
I did that myself when I was a kid. I hid from my mum because she wanted to walk back from Charing Cross Station and I wanted to get a bus. So I hid. And for all intents and purposes, I'd gone missing. And she went and I had to get have the police pick me up and everything, take me to the police station because
You little asshole. Where did you hide?
I just hid in a little doorway, and my plan was to pop out. But when I popped out, no one was there, and I was like, "Oh, this has gone wrong. This has gone terrifying."
That's terrifying. We had a similar. We had one like that where my parents we were on holiday and we were like sitting on the rocks by the sea, like fishing or something, like crab fishing or something. You know, you never caught anything, but whatever, doing something like that. And they were going to go and look at gallery or something, and I was, you know, I was old enough that was okay. But then there were some boys who were like kind of trying to start trouble, some bigger boys. And me and my sister were like, well, let's just get off these rocks. Let's just go back onto the kind of road, you know? Yeah, when my parents had come back, we weren't there. And so they properly rang the alarm and stuff. And we were walking back through the town. I think it was in St. Ives, right? And we were walking back through the town. And there were all these people coming out of their houses, like putting on their like emergency lifeboat gear. And a big flare went up. And we were like, it's quite interesting, you know? And then, yeah, and eventually we like we walked back to where we had been, and there was my parents or my mum was there, like running, like crying, you know, and all these lifeboat people looked really relieved. They weren't like, oh, you've wasted our time, but apparently my dad had like found a crab line just like ours, like washed up on some rocks, you know, like jagged rocks at the bottom of a cliff kind of thing. So, and he hadn't told my mum because awful. So I can't even imagine how that was for my dad.
No.
Proper finding.
I remember trying. I was going to make my own way back, and then I realised that I wasn't allowed to cross roads. So I kind of got as soon as I got to the curb, I was like, I'm stuck now. But the solution, of course, when you're a kid, who'd you ask? A lady, because all ladies are all right.
Yeah.
You don't ask a man, you ask a lady.
I got lost and asked a lady in a shoe shop. And then she used the loudspeaker in the shopping centre to call my mum.
That's pretty mild.
Right.
I think
always ask a lady.
A mall is
always
a good
ask a lady, kids.
Be lost.
For all our listeners who are under 8,
stop listening.
Remember, ask a lady. Public service.
All right, Matt, what's your number one?
My number one is Peter Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey's dad. George Bailey is a good dad, in theory, but he is an incidental dad. The only bit where the plot where it would kind of make sense of him being is the idea of the pressure, the financial pressure he has from having kids when he's just refused his pay rise and new job from Potter. That's the only bit where his dad comes into question. But Peter Bailey is the person who instills George with the idea that maybe he doesn't have to do all the things. And it's that idea where Peter Bailey is a person who is basically made this town, Bedford Falls, where George Bailey lives, and he is the person who has managed to get these guys out of poverty and has created this little township thing where people live, where it's Potter who's a person who's exploiting it and is trying to take that back. Where, of course, it's Peter Bailey who is the person who's the idealist, who has created all these homes for all the kind of community to live in. And it's Peter Bailey who tries to convince George to stay on because he realizes that of all his kids, he's really the only person qualified to continue what he wants to do. But when he brings it up and tells George, George says, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to stay here. I can't stay in this town for my whole life. And he says, then sort of realize, of course, that that's what his dad's done. And his dad goes, you're right. That's your life. Your life isn't my life. You should do whatever you want to do. And so he's not even needs him to do it. It's about people. He's giving agency to his kids. So it's like, it's up to you what you do. But of course, the tragedy is, of course, this is the last evening of Peter Bailey's life as well. So it's going to have a profound effect on the rest of the film. But it's a thing where you see him. It's such a clever thing where that character is barely in the film, really. And every time you see him, he is the person who George has to ask when he realizes that that Bauer, the druggist, might be about to poison the kid. There's a ask Dad. He'll ask Dad. When he goes to see his dad is trying to shout down Potter. So you get all these little bits of, you know who this person is. And it's the idea that after his dad dies and George Bailey's trying to convince him to keep the building and loan going, it's Potter who says, you know, it's not. The building and loan is just a building. The building and loan is Peter Bailey, and he's dead. That's who's done all this. He's the person. And so you need this sort of figurehead for it. But I think he's the best cinematic dad by having the most effect on cinema's greatest character. And therefore, he is the best fictional dad, technically.
That's a good one.
It is a good one. I have another cinematic dad to rival that one. Stuart Mackenzie, aka the Scottish dad in the 1993 Mike Myers film So I Married an Axe Murderer, who is also played by Mike Myers. This is the movie where Mike Myers plays a beat poet living in San Francisco, and I think it's underrated.
It's very underrated. Yeah, it's very good.
It has horrible reviews, but it is genuinely funny. It's one of those movies. If I watch it, if I see it, I have to watch it all the way through, and I end up crying, laughing. Mostly because of the dad. And this is the all-time most perfectly observed Scottish father on film, I think. If you have a Scottish dad like I do, to watch this is like watching a documentary. And I wondered if maybe Myers' dad was Scottish, but according to Wikipedia, his parents are from Liverpool. So I don't know how he got this so correct. But all the stuff about tormenting the young kid because of his big head is pure Scottish dad. Like the kid watching it for the first time, I remember my dad was sitting behind me on the sofa, and I kept like going, are all dads like this? I thought this was just my dad. Is this a Scottish dad thing? Because this kid is sitting in front of the TV and the dad is behind him shouting, "Heed, move!" And he's calling him Sputnik. And he says, you'd make a better door than a window. Actually, I don't think he even said that. That's something my dad says when I'm in the way. And then when the kid wanders off, he shouts after him, "Oh, go cry yourself to sleep on your huge pillow." And it's just so perfectly observed that I think it's the most perfect representation of a Scottish dad we have on tape. And people think it's a joke, and it really isn't. When I moved out of home, and my brother set up the Wi-Fi in my dad's house, the Wi-Fi password was "huge heat" because of this film. I have this one is a total emotional attachment, so I cannot say if he is objectively the number one dad, but
But
he
you're
is
right.
on
I
my list.
100% assumed that is Mike Myers' dad. I just
Yeah.
convinced myself that is. It's too. It feels too. There's
It's-
too much detail for it to be like a character creation.
Yeah, you don't big head thing. I don't know why this is such a Scottish thing, but it is. If you speak to other people who have Scottish dads, they're like, yeah, the huge heat thing, and getting in the way. Uh, it is so specific that I can't believe his dad isn't Scottish. I don't know how this happened.
It could
It's
be
brilliant.
Scottish in Liverpool. I mean, he could, or his dad could have had a Scottish dad. I mean,
Yeah.
I bet it's there.
But it's so atypical in any movies, really, for the dad character to be to someone who essentially takes the piss out of their children. Whereas actually, it's much more likely that that's what a dad is doing.
Oh yeah, in real life that's way more common. But on a TV,
Yeah.
it kind of be hard to write. It's hard to write that without it seeming awful. But in reality, it's not that awful. Like,
yeah,
lots of people have dads that are like that.
It's a loving kind of piss taking.
That's a film I definitely need to watch again. I don't think I've seen that since VHS, so
it's great.
Time to have another watch. My number one is also a film dad, but he's more of a comic book dad. And I'm wearing a T-shirt of him.
I thought this would come up.
Okay.
of course.
It's Ogami Ito from the comic books Lone Wolf and Cub, or from the Baby Cart film series. And is he a good dad? I don't know, because he's basically so he's a widower, and he was the shogun's executioner. He's Kaishakunin in feudal Japan, and he kills an awful lot of people. I mean, thousands. But his wife's been killed, and he kind of makes a deal with the devil. He kind of says, "I'm going to hell." And he's kind of amoral from that point on. But the one thing he holds on to is looking after his son. And he travels Japan with his son, trying to get revenge on the guys who set him up. They set him up and they killed his wife. And he pushes his kid around in a baby cart, kind of primitive wooden bugaboo or upper baby. And he equips it with weapons, and he has all his swords. But he's just like there's 28 volumes of the book from volume 1 to volume 28. They're big books. There's a lot in them. Pictures and words, written by Kazuo Koike and drawn by artist Kosuke Kojima. And they started in 1970. Took a while to finish. There's been films made, whatever, but it's an incredibly long, involved story centering on a dad and his son. Small son. He's a baby at the start. Grows up a bit to be maybe like a toddler or a bit bigger. Yeah, he's probably 6 by the time the book ends. But it's just it's a samurai story, and it's completely amoral, and it takes in a million other little stories. Every chapter is another story involving other people. They come to this village. The people say, "We really need you to defeat that person who's making our life a misery." And he goes, "I suppose if you pay me." And they go, "We don't have enough." And he does it because he kind of has this weird duty. And he's not a good dad because he's always putting his son in harm's way. I mean, if you're attaching blades to the wheels of your pram, you're basically saying you're going to be pushing your child into danger. But he is the greatest swordsman in the land, and so he can kind of get away with it. But it's so weird as a kind of action-y saga for boys. You know what I mean? It's a blood and action sort of thing. But it's got this hugely paternal sort of current running through it, and it's extremely philosophical, and it doesn't flesh out the kid. The kid doesn't get much of a personality. He gets a little bit of a personality, but it's all about this man, and he's a dad, and he's his dad, and he's a killer, and that's all he is, pretty much. but he brings
I like
justice to the land.
that at the start, the kid is given a choice to the kind of life he wants to have, though. So there's this idea that the kid makes the choice,
Yeah.
where an infant is put in front of, is it a sword and is it rice or something?
No, it's a ball.
And it's a ball, yeah. And it's like, what kind of life do you want? And it's the kid who walks towards a sword. He's like, okay, that's how we're going to do it.
Well, he says, like, I'm going to walk the path to hell, choose the ball, and you join your mother in death, because you can't come with me. But if you choose the sword, you can come with me on the path to hell. And he does. And you know, it's a series of 6 films, and they're fantastic. They're not as cerebral in a way as the books, but they're like weird. They because they have this guy Thomas Oburo Wakayama, and he's like this incredibly enigmatic actor. I don't know there's ever been a performance. This is a guy who's like killing people and doing all these things, but he just gives away nothing. And he appears to like embody all this intense thought and thinking and stuff, but he doesn't give it to you. You know, it's all in there. They're amazing films, very strange, amazing music. And then they made the films. They took 2 of the films and made them into a kind of trashy movie, Shogun Assassin, for the Western market with dubbing and stuff. It doesn't make any sense because they smushed 2 films together, but it has fantastic music of a totally different synth sort of style. It's just a big saga about a dad and a kid. So when I was a little kid, when I had a little kid, one little kid, and I was pushing them along in a pram, and I know other dads who are like this. It's like, it's Lone Wolf and Cub. This is my Lone Wolf and Cub time. I might have to kill somebody, you know, with a sword. Somebody might jump out of the bushes at any moment.
And I guess
sounds like The Road.
It's not like The Road, because The Road, he's desperate to make his son survive, right, and give his son a better life. This is like, I'm going to hell with my son, and I am completely competent. I can destroy everybody, you know, and I can deliver justice in small villages around Japan.
I guess in pop culture, the 2 big things were the Max Allan Collins book Road to Perdition that became the Sam Mendes Tom Hanks movie is basically very, I mean, I think it's freely acknowledges that it's adapted from Lone Wolf and Cub, where it's done as a kind of prohibition era gangster story. And I guess now The Mandalorian, the sort of Star Wars spin-off, is basically, oh, we'll just do it as Lone Wolf and Cub. So it's just,
yeah, it's a bit like that. The Mandalorian borrows imagery and leans on it and stuff, but it's very different when you are the dad and you got 28 volumes of manga about you. It's just I don't know. It's a beautiful book. It's one of my favorite books, 100%, and is a top dad in a way. In a way.
Did we have any honourable mentions of other dads that didn't make the grade?
I do. I've got 2. I've got Tony Soprano, not for being a father to his kids. I mean, he's a very protective father to the point of questionable violence, but it was his relationship to the ducks at the beginning. He was a good father to the ducks. And then when they flew away and he had a panic attack and he had to go to therapy, that started the whole TV show. So I think it was a very important relationship there. I also had the dad in Philip Roth's Portnoy's Complaint, who I don't remember anything about other than the fact that he always enters a scene by exiting the toilet. And I think having an unpredictable arse or some sort of indigestion problem is an essential part of being a dad. It's like second to eyebrows. You got to have eyebrows and an arse problem.
You got to coming out of the toilet is a real dad thing, definitely.
Yeah, he's got constant. He's constantly constipated and he's always trying. So whenever there's a conversation that he's got to be part of, he comes out of the toilet to be part of it, because that's just where he lives.
The ones that I kind of were close to doing, but they're 2 kind of similar films, were the sort of dad characters from the two big Wes Anderson dad movies, Steve Zissou and Royal Tannenbaum, is that it's that Royal Tannenbaum particularly feels like a really good dad movie because it's all about a dad's relationship with all of his kids. And but the thing about him is he's a bad dad. Everything about him is a bad dad. And yet the journey of the film is, by the end of the film, you're still gonna be in bits when the bad dad dies. It's that sort of idea that you go, oh, but he's still a dad to these kids. And it is someone sort of almost accidentally making amends, whereas you sort of see the effect it's had on all these kids. Whereas there are these moments in it which are like real kind of, for you know, that kind of comedy film, which you laugh at. It's one of those very clever films that really walks a tightrope between utter tragedy and sort of quite silly comedy. And it is that thing where I think that's a really clever thing, that at the end of it, this guy who's a bad guy, how much you care about this bad guy, because you see him through the eyes of his kids. So he's now sort of he's redeemed through his kids. And I think that's a really good. And Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou is the other one, which is the, you know, a dad movie with, I don't know what Wes Anderson's relationship is with his own dad, but it certainly suggests a complicated relationship with his dad. And I think he tells it. Like, I think those two films of his are really where he's kind of firing on all cylinders. And I don't think he ever really has hit those heights before or since. I think that's the kind of loop of his movies. And as much as now he's like an Oscar bait guy, and he's like, the last couple of movies are like best film, it's like he's done it. He's had his moment, and now he makes Wes Anderson movies. But the ones that have real power to them are those movies, I think. That kind of, and I guess to a slightly lesser farther extent, but it's certainly in the background, Rushmore as well. But I think particularly Royal Tannenbaum and Steve Zissou are all about, it's a big movie, two big movies that are about very complicated dads. And in a lot of times, you know, they're all about dads. Who's the dad? Does it matter who your dad is? They're all big dad movies. But because they're both about the same topic, it seemed weird to try and pick one over the other, or they're both big dad looming movies.
I was just thinking about one which I've only seen once, so I wouldn't put it in my top 5, but the Will Smith film, In Pursuit of Happiness. That's a proper make you cry dad performance. He kind of does everything for his kid. I think he's a widower as well, something like that. He seems to be on his own with the kid anyway, and it's not a fictional dad though. It's a true story, I think. So maybe that doesn't count at all. Yeah, I think that's a true story. But it's a hell of a dad one.
Talk yourself out of a dad.
Yeah, no dad for that one. Got any worse dads? There's a lot of terrible dads.
Yeah, I put them on my list. They're not separate.
But just means so many dads in films and books and things are just these like terrible people, and they're clearly based on the creative person's dad, and you just think, oh god.
Yeah.
But awful. I still might. I think the terrible dads are just the forgettable ones. I would still put a bad dad on a list. I can't.
There's the. Did you see another Pixar one? Did you see Onward?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
That is a film which cleverly, it wasn't on the list. Like, it's one of those films that feels like you're watching a mid-level Pixar, and then the ending is like oh, there you go. That's your big build-up. But that's a film that almost buries the lead by saying, hey, it's a film about dads. And at the end you go, it's not a film about dads. You've tricked us. You've tricked us. And when you've prepared yourself for one gut punch, they've done another one, and you go, you didn't allow me to prepare for what the actual film's about. because you set up that it's a dad movie, but it's not a dad movie. It's about something else.
Well, I just probably just leave us to say the important things. A happy Father's Day to all the dads, and even the bad dads, and
Or the granddads.
it's not Granddad's Day. Oh, wait a minute.
Is there one?
Oh, that's how it works, though. They're still dads.
Yeah.
See,
They're still dads.
once you've been a dad, you're always a dad, even if you then become a granddad. Yeah, please let us know yours. Especially let me know, because I didn't think of mine very well.
I think this is definitely one which is like, it's a hard list to come up with, and I'm fully expecting there might be tons of people going, what about such and such? And I'll have to go, yeah, of course. Of course, that one I've totally forgotten about and never thought about.
I know my sister's going to be like, you left off all the ones that we loved when we were kids in children's books and cartoons and films and stuff. And I'll be like, oh, yeah, I didn't think of them. So, yeah, I'm fully expecting to. If you ask me next week, I'm sure I'll have a much better top 5 fictional dads list.
Well, my number 1 isn't moving.
Thank you for joining us this week, Hayley.
Yep.
Thank you for having me again.
You got to go back to writing now. Ha ha.
I know.
No more rest.
This is fun though. It feels rude to have taken up 2 guest spots. You've only had 2 guests so far, and now I'm a repeat.
Yeah, but now you're. But you were the only person we could consider to have as a dad fan. It would have seemed weird to have someone else on.
Yeah, who should we get on for dads? I don't know. And we can now call you friend of the show. We could be like friend of the show, Hayley Campbell, friend of the show.
Yeah, friend of the show.
Friend of the show. You have to be on. If you're on Tice, you become friend of the show. This is a fact.
Yeah.
We got some more
series regular.
We got some more people coming up, haven't we?
Yeah. We got to get some. It's all organisational, but it's all in the stages. We put some feelers out.
Put some feelers out. Nice. We got some good suggestions for top 5s today.
Yeah,
I've seen some really good ones today.
I've seen some good ones.
Top 5 smells I'm quite looking forward to doing. No, that's the kind of thing I think about. Top 5 smells.
The best smells.
I remember, was it it was in Gosh. It was during a stock take or something. I can't remember who it was. Was it Tom Crowley or somebody said, if you could
already
smell...
This is setting it up for... This will no way be a great top 5 smell. Such an unlikely setting to have a great smell.
It was one of those questions that was put to the people in the room doing a very monotonous task, and it was, if you could smell like one part of your body, but all of you smells like that part of your body, which part of your body would you smell like? And there was discussion, and then people settled on forearm. Okay. If all of your body could smell like a forearm.
Do you know what? I think I remember this, and I agree. Yeah, confirmed. Absolutely confirmed.
Would it make you top smells though?
I'm sure I brought this up at the time.
Top 5 smells on my body is not a list we're going to be doing.
If I have a bath, I often have a sniff of my forearm actually and go, yeah, I like it. It's that nice. It's that sort of thing where you've washed your hands and you go like, a little bit of scented soap. Love it. Love it.
I often tell my kids when I try and ask them, try and make them think they're going to get an easy question. I say, how many arms have you got? And they go, 2. And I go, no, because you've got 4 arms.
Yeah,
that's a dad joke.
It's a dad joke.
That is an absolute
it's the
dad joke.
Kind of, why you kind of thing I like to do with them. See, there's some dadding. There's a bit of dadding for you there. Some real world dadding. IRL dad. Salute to all the fictional dads and the real dads, and we'll catch you next time. Like and subscribe and all the other things. And just do them, and we'll see you next time with another incredibly trivial but very thought about list.
Bye.